Hi, everyone. Today, let's talk about the FOMC minutes. Then we'll talk about NVIDIA earnings. Then we'll go over the charts. Then we'll go over my positions and my thoughts going into tomorrow. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays. So make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So starting off with the Fed minutes, they actually didn't say much beyond what they said previously. They're still trying to get down to 2%. They plan to raise rates for a little bit longer, and they're talking about another 25 basis points at the next meeting. They said a few members potentially considered 50 basis points, but that didn't happen, so they did stick with 25 basis points. Of course, it is a little concerning that they talked about 50 basis points at the last meeting, and then we've had quite a bit of inflationary data since the last meeting, so there's certainly a potential they could do 50 basis points this time. It certainly seems like they have the evidence to do so, but we haven't really seen that from them quite yet. And then they mentioned here 5.25 to 5.5 as their potential terminal rate, which would indicate 3 more 25 basis point hikes until we get to that level, unless they do 50 basis points at the next meeting and then 25 after that, and then they go into their pause. Right now, the expectation is 25, 25, 25, but they could certainly cut that down with the 50 basis points at the next meeting. Moving over to NVIDIA and their earnings, unfortunately for me, they crushed it. They increased their chip demand by 11% based on data center revenue powered by AI, which put them up to $3.6 billion. And you can see what that looks like here. EPS 88 cents versus 81. Revenue 6.5 billion versus 6. So they beat on both the top and bottom line. The stock was up 45% in 2023, and of course it's going to go higher on this news, beating expectations. They haven't put out their guidance yet, so maybe they have some forward guidance that's a little rough, but they continue to see growth, and I'm sure AI is going to be a big driver of that going forward, and I expect NVIDIA to go up tomorrow. Moving over to the charts, starting with the 4-hour and the daily chart here on the S&Ps. Of course, this daily chart looks extremely weak. We did get below that trend line here today, and we should expect to come back into these next levels. At least that's what I'm looking at. Around 393, 394. I do think that's going to be the next level of support, but it is worth noting here on the 4-hour chart, we are getting some wicks of rejection as support. Does look like we're back testing that area now on the NVIDIA news, pushing up the markets. The SPY was pretty weak today, actually weaker than the NASDAQ. Didn't get into oversold conditions, so is actually giving a little bit higher strength, and momentum on the 4-hour is kind of building to the upside. If we do get a rally, I do expect 404 to be a pretty strong area of resistance, and that's where I expect sellers would come in. So that's about $4 of upside, about 1% move to the upside. And if we do sell off, it's about 1.5% to the downside that I would be looking for. On the daily chart, that also coincides with the 144 EMA as well as the 200 SMA. It would be pretty surprising to me that this down move just ends here at the 55. It does happen occasionally here, but you can see last time we pushed right through that. Here we pushed through it as well. And of course, any of the bigger down moves, we pushed right through those levels very strongly. This is still somewhat of an uptrend here, and the next level of support on the major trend would be that 394 level. So keep an eye out for that. Of course, if we get above 400, that would be interesting. Then you'd be looking to 404, like I said. But do remember that the 4-hour trend is still significantly bearish. Moving over to the NASDAQ here, you can see we got a really strong bar after hours. We were basically sitting at 294.30, 294.20, somewhere in that zone. And then we got the NVIDIA earnings, and we pushed up quite a lot, about $2 very quickly. Looking at the daily close here, it is a doji, slightly bullish. Last time we got a doji, though, it was very bearish the next day, so that's interesting. Still looking at the daily 200 SMA and daily 144 EMAs, sitting between about 288 and 290 as the next level of support. That would actually cause this structure to break down as well. We've been watching that for a while. And that does continue to be pretty strong support here yesterday and today. So do keep that in mind. We certainly could push through this level, basically at 296.50. If we did push up to the next level after that, that'd be about 300, maybe 299, somewhere in that zone. So once again, about 1% of upside potential tomorrow, in my opinion. But if we do break these lows, then you're looking at about 288 to 290. So that'd be around 2% to the downside. Does have a little ways to go here. You can see on the 4-hour, it would have to push through these previous candles, take out this previous low, and then get into this zone. And I'm not sure that's going to happen before we at least have somewhat of a retrace into tomorrow. Otherwise, in terms of momentum and RSI, very similar to the SPY. 4-hour momentum, slightly bullish. Daily momentum, slightly bearish. RSI, slightly bearish. RSI, slightly bullish. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow. Similarly, on the Russell, we got a doji, slightly bullish. Of course, momentum on the daily chart, very bearish still. Looking at the Dow on the daily chart, coming right into that zone of potential support. If you do get a bounce from here, you're looking at 334, 335 at this previous trend line. If we do break through this level, then you have to be looking at 325, 326 at the 144 EMA on the daily chart. Once again, about 1% in either direction. Looking at the Russell here, similarly, if we do get above this 189 level, which continues to be resistance here, then you would be looking for a test all the way up at about 191. But that 189 level has been quite strong. And if we do break down from here, then you're looking at about 184, 183. So a little bit more downside risk than upside potential, but does make sense as this trend continues to roll over here. Moving over to Apple and Tesla. Apple continuing to stay under this trend line, retested that, retesting the 9 EMA here on the 4-hour as well. If it does reject from here, you have to expect probably 144, 145. That's this previous consolidation area. The bottom of that is sitting right around 142, which coincides with the 144 EMA and the trend line of support that we're looking at next. Of course, you do have to get through these previous highs at 145, 146. But right now, RSI looks slightly bullish, momentum slightly bullish, but realistically, I would expect to get a rejection off of this trend and then a continuation to the downside, potentially. Otherwise, looking at Tesla, continues to stay trapped between 193.50 and 214. Tested that high, made a slightly higher low, made a slightly lower high, came in, tested support, and then rejected slightly off of that level. Now you would expect a retest of 214. If we get above that level, then it's off to the races. If we get rejection from there, then you're probably expecting 193.50 once again. Moving over to consumer staples and consumer discretionary. No change to the thesis on staples, continues to hold in this trend, slightly bullish now. You can see we're above the 921 and 55 EMAs here on the 4-hour chart, 200 SMA sloping to the upside, and we seem to be trapped between these EMAs here and the 144 EMA. We've been in the zone for a while now, and it's not changing anytime soon. At least it doesn't look like it will. We did throw a wick to the upside, got rejected once again here at the 200 SMA. And then got support once again here at the end of day, so that's kind of interesting. Otherwise, no change. Looking at consumer discretionary here, went basically flat here today. We do get rejection at the 9 EMA and 55 EMA on the 4-hour chart. Then you have to be looking probably around 140, 141. Should be a pretty decent move, a downside from here. Probably not all in one day. That would be pretty significant, but that is where I'm looking in terms of a longer term price target. Does also correlate with the tops of this previous consolidation range. And you can see overall momentum here on the EMAs still moving to the downside. RSI sitting below 50, very bearish. Momentum slightly ticking up, similar to the indices. Moving over here to AMD and NVIDIA, you can see they're both up after hours quite a bit here. AMD getting that sympathy play, slightly bullish momentum into the end of day. Does seem like we're going to go higher here. And then looking at NVIDIA, huge green bar went from 207, 208 all the way up to 223, 224. Of course, this is an area where we did see some resistance, but this catalyst could absolutely push us to new highs and is probably going to tomorrow, in my opinion. Looks like we're almost already getting across here after hours. If this does cross and push higher, then you're got to be looking for overbought conditions here on the 4-hour chart, which is likely to push you up into this 235 zone tomorrow. That's what I would be looking for. Maybe we get a short-term pullback after earnings, but right now you have to assume that NVIDIA is going to go higher, and that'll likely take the NASDAQ with it, in my opinion. I don't know if NVIDIA can support the whole NASDAQ or the whole market really, but it definitely will be strong tomorrow, and that will play a factor, especially in the NASDAQ. Moving over to yields here on the 2-year and the 10-year on the 4-hour chart. The trend continues to stay intact. The momentum on the 2-year is slowing for sure. We did not make a new high here recently. We're struggling to stay above the high going back to February 17th. Looking at the previous high for the 10-year, still slightly below it, but we did bounce off the 21 EMA here on the 4-hour. Momentum here on both charts is to the downside, and you can see RSI is below the SMA on both charts, giving you the indicator that this might pull back to the 50 line at least. That would be pretty interesting, and that would also break the trend, at least here in the short term. Right now, the 10-year continues to make new highs, bounced off of that previous high, going back to the 17th, which the 2-year is not quite doing here yet. Moving over to the dollar on the hour and the 4 hour, it did basically what we thought. We saw that it was sloping higher, making slightly higher highs. And once again, it did so here, breaking out above the 104.41 level that we were watching before. We're right at the previous high in terms of resistance. Momentum building to the upside in both cases. More so on the 4 hour. Hourly chart starting to fade a little bit. Maybe we get a retest of this level and then a push higher. If the dollar does continue to rise, that should be bad for stocks. But if they do ride the momentum from good earnings, especially from NVIDIA, that could push the markets up a little bit, at least in the short term, especially if the dollar pulls back a little bit here, tests support, maybe gets below, finding support slightly below, and then pushes higher. Might give us a day or two of pullback on equities. And then once the dollar continues to the upside potentially, then equities would start to break out more to the downside. Moving over to JNK, this one continues to be fairly tough to read. We do have strong resistance at 91. We got into that zone today and couldn't quite retest it fully, but it does look weak. But overall, this was a bullish day, much more bullish than the major indices, potentially indicating that we're going to get an update tomorrow. Definitely something to watch. Junk showing a little bit of strength here today. It's worth noting that we're basically at the 50 level on the hourly chart and that this could certainly turn down from here. Maybe we fully retest the 91 and get that actual rejection, or maybe we even overshoot that trend line just a little bit, hitting the 55 here on the hourly chart that's trading around 91.21. Maybe it moves down slightly, 91.17 tomorrow. That would be interesting. Daily chart, looking at that 9 EMA sitting at 91.45. Maybe we get an update, retest that, and then we get the continuation. There's, of course, a trend line sitting just above that, and then we have all the major EMAs sitting above that. So a lot of upside resistance for sure, but right now does look slightly bullish. Got a step down here on daily momentum. Hourly momentum is bullish. If this pushes through the 50 level here on the hourly chart, you do have to be slightly bullish going into tomorrow. Moving over to TLT, not much to add here. Continues to downtrend. Looks like a solid downtrend. 4 hours showing a slight pullback. It's worth noting that this last pullback got into slightly bullish momentum. And this pullback here today is slightly more bullish. And we did get a pretty solid cross here. Potentially looking at a little bit stronger pullback, maybe to the 102.50 level. We still have not filled this gap going back to December, and we certainly haven't tested that most recent low at 99.50. Realistically, I would like to see this gap filled before we get a pullback to the upside. That would give us a more substantial low, and then we can potentially look for more upside from there. But right now, it looks like we're making a slightly higher low, getting a pullback, and then I would expect that to continue until we find the more solid support at 99.50. Otherwise, you can't ignore the fact that momentum on the 4 hour is slightly bullish, more bullish than it's been here recently. You can see we had a little bit of bullish momentum here on the 14th of February, which ended up getting rejected very strongly. That was also at the major trend line. So it makes sense that we had a little bit of chop in that zone. And right now we're kind of in no man's land, not at a real support yet, but potentially make a slightly higher low from there. Moving over to the VIX on the hour and the daily charts, you can see we got up into that zone that we talked about, touching the 144 EMA at that 2360 level. We talked about this zone being an area of resistance. We're still on top of the trend line, so that looks good. You would expect to see this jump up tomorrow, which is good for the bears if you're looking for that. Momentum here on the daily, still very strong. Did have a slight bit of bearish momentum, but it looks like that might be fading here on the hourly chart. Hopefully we find a strong support and get to see a nice move up, back up to this 2350, maybe all the way up to 2480, testing the 200-day moving average. That would be interesting. And then if we get above there, then who knows how low we're going to go on equities. Obviously not in overbought conditions yet on the VIX on the daily chart. Moving over to the 4 hour looks very similar, testing support. If it breaks down here tomorrow, then you have to look at 21 as your level of support, maybe even down to 2050 at the 4 hour 200. That would be interesting. But realistically, I would like to see it bounce from here, showing more strength going into tomorrow. Overall, though, this is still a bull trend on the VIX, even if we get a little bit of a pullback. Momentum on the 4 hour indicating that that pullback is still probably going to happen, but overall daily momentum saying that it'll probably be a pullback and a push higher. Moving over here to my positions, you can see I made a little bit of money, not a lot, but a little. And then unfortunately, I kind of put myself in a bind here. So I sold some 294 calls. You can see those are in a little bit of a loser. My cost basis there is going to be 294.50. I'm going to get a sign on those calls, some short shares at 294.50. I immediately sold some 294 puts for $1.50, putting my break even at 296 for this position. And it is overall bearish, so I do want to see the markets go down tomorrow. This is not necessarily the position that I wanted. I was really hoping that these calls would expire worthless, and once I saw that they did not, I did sell the puts immediately against it to help protect myself to the upside. And of course, after hours, the Nasdaq is up quite a lot because of NVIDIA. The question is that move going to hold? That's definitely something that I will be looking for tomorrow. Overall, still bearish based on the trend, but I am going to be entertaining the fact that we could see a push to the upside based on the momentum from NVIDIA and just the basing formation that we saw pretty much across the markets and specifically on the Nasdaq. Let me know down in the comment section what you think of the charts or what you think of the FOMC minutes or the NVIDIA earnings. Is NVIDIA going to push us to the moon and break this down move? Or are we just kind of overextended and we need to pull back either way? Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.